My name is Frank Youngworth, and it is my pleasure to introduce World War II bomber pilot Joe Meagher. Meagher was born on a dairy farm in Illinois. He was the youngest of 7 children who attended a one-room schoolhouse during grades 1 through 8. At the age of 14, Joe entered high school and began to drive a car. Meagher used his mother's automobile to transport 5 other students to the school that was 8 miles each way. For this transportation, every student paid 5 cents per day per ride. In essence, at a very young age, Joe Meagher became a family profit center. That was how Joe Meagher's life got started and prepared him for what was to come after high school. Let's bring in Captain Joe Meagher at this point to give his oral history of the time that he spent fighting World War II in Europe as part of the United States Army Air Corps. Take it away, Joe.
Well, thank you. After I got out of high school, which was 1938, I was supposed to go to college, and I resisted considerably because I had older brothers and sisters that went to college and graduated and couldn't get a job because it were in the middle of the Depression, and there weren't jobs available. So it really, in effect, it amounted to a very poor role model. But so my folks finally said, will you go to our family lawyer, Joe Wiedemann, and he will give you some advice. I said, sure. And so I went to Elgin, Illinois, to Joe Wiedemann's office, and we talked about various things, and then suddenly he says, we're going to have a war in a couple of years, and if you wait until the war starts, you will not have a decision to make as to whom you want to see, such as Air Force or Army, Navy, whatever it be. But if you go now, you can select your future. So he said, now that's Joe Wiedemann, says he had a brother at Selfridge Field, Michigan. Selfridge Field was an old Air Corps base. And he said, my brother really likes it up there. Well, I said, that sounds pretty good to me. So I think that's what I'll do. I think I'll join. So I did. I went up to Selfridge. They put me on a train. Went up to Selfridge Field, Michigan, and checked in. And at that time, there were probably 12, 15 other recruits that came in that same week or so. But I liked it very much for the opening. And Selfridge was an old base, and the living quarters were 2 stories high, strong brick. And I became a recruit. And I was there probably 6 or 8 weeks when I was put on KP. That's kitchen police. And there were 12 or 15 of us on kitchen police. And they said that at that time, you stay on for a week or 2, but you'll never get it again. Well, it so happened, possibly one of the last days on kitchen police, Johnny Buckles, the first sergeant, came in, and Johnny Buckles was a real military first sergeant, and he called us to attention, and we lined up, and then he called my name out to step forward, and of course I didn't know what I'd done wrong or what I'd done right, and he pinned a first class chevron on my sleeve. He said, "You're now a private first class." Well, that was quite a surprise to me. Nobody else got it. But I didn't say a lot because I didn't know why or whatever it would be. And I was happy in that I went from $17 a month to 21. And now that's a pretty big boost in pay. So I took that, and then in those ensuing months, I got to be a corporal or another grade or something like that. And then I went to a number of Air Force schools. I went to two in Chanute, Illinois. That was an Army Air Base there too. And then I went to one in Chicago on instruments. Now I was an enlisted man at this time, and these were all mechanical schools, and that was my future. And then gradually I got to be another promotion to sergeant. Well, getting promotions that fast, of course, the increase in pay was a big thing, and some increase in responsibility, but that didn't bother me. And anyway, we got to the point where I wasn't a staff sergeant yet, but then came along Pearl Harbor, December 7th. And that was in 39. No, 41. That was in 41. Right. So we had to pack up the whole squadron and load everything on a train and go to San Diego. And we went to San Diego and California, and then just before we were to ship out to South Pacific, myself and about 3 or 4 others were taken out of the line, in a sense, and informed that we were not going. And of course that upset us quite a bit, because all our friends are going, and why? And I checked with every officer I knew to do something about it, and they couldn't do anything about it. And so they took me out, and then the old squadron went to the South Pacific, and they sent me back to Newark, New Jersey, to part of the formation of another group. And now they made me a staff sergeant. Well, you can believe, as a staff sergeant, was more money again, and I'm only 21 or 2 or something like that, and I was very surprised to be a staff sergeant, and they made me line chief. That's a mechanical line of responsibility. Well, things went fine. I put in a few changes, and one of the things I noticed was I had 3 master sergeants under me. Really, what it amounted to was the master sergeants were old. They were in their late 30s or maybe 40s, and they didn't want to take on the additional responsibility of the line, which was okay with me. And then one particular day, maybe 2 or 3 months had gone by, I was told to report to Captain Hickman. He was the squadron commander. So I went up to Captain Hickman and trying to figure out what was the problem. And we talked about various little changes that we made in the line. Then he finally said, "Why don't you go to flight school?" Oh, I said, "Captain, I don't have any college." And at that time, college was, you had to have 2 years of college to go to flight school. And he said, "I'll write a letter saying that the Air Force schools that you attended equates to 2 years of college." Now he said, all you have to do is, if you can pass the physical. Do you think you can pass the physical? Oh, I said, yeah, I don't think I have any problem there. So I remember this vividly. This was on a Monday. Tuesday, they sent me into Newark, New Jersey, to take a physical. I took the physical on Tuesday, came back. On Wednesday, I reported to Captain Hickman. Thursday, I was gone to the West Coast, and went out to the West Coast to San Diego, and then now I'm a cadet, flight cadet, and they sent me to Chico, California, along with others, of course. And that was for the primary training of flying. And I had a instructor by the name of Ryan. I've forgotten his first name, but he was a Canadian bush pilot, a man about 45, 48. And he was extremely interesting, and of course, being a Canadian bush pilot, he had a lot of stories of Canada and the planes he flew. So, but anyway, at cadet school, they made me a cadet captain. Now, really, the reason they did that was because I had military experience, and nearly everybody else there were right off the city streets and didn't know too much about the world. So they made me cadet captain, and with Ryan, his group, and I was part of it, I think there was 6 of us in his class. And there were probably 150 cadets, brand new cadets to learn how to fly. And so consequently, there were 18 or 20 teachers or instructors, is the word I want. Anyway, as we're flying and learning how to fly, I flew in soloed in 4 hours and 20 minutes. And at that time, 5 hours was excellent. So, but I decided I was a pretty good pilot. And I really learned how to be a good pilot by the instructors. They asked me, did I ever take flying lessons before? No, and I didn't. Anyway, we graduated. And from one thing to another, went to basic in another city, I forget what it was, and then went to advanced school in Yuma, Arizona. And at Yuma, we flew twin engines, an AT-9 is what it was. It was a lovely little trainer plane. And when we graduated, we had our graduation dinner in the mess hall. And there was probably 15 or 17 instructors there. And by this time, there were probably only 75 or 80 of us left. The rest had washed out. They washed out about 50%, and if 150, so that's about right. But at the dinner, the instructors probably threw in $1 or $2 to give a prize. And I know I was in the back of the room, and a nice guy right across the street, across the dinner table, was a fellow by the name of DeStefano. And they said, the instructors announced the fact that they had an award for best pilot. And they said, Joe Meagher. And DeStefano said, that's you. I said, no, that's not me. I'm Meagher. And yeah, that's you. Anyway, I finally got up and walked over, and they gave me the award, and it's not a trophy or anything. It was a billfold, a plastic billfold. That's when plastic first came out, and there was no money in it. I looked, and so that again told me I was pretty good. And from there, they shipped me to Lake Charles, Louisiana, And Lake Charles, we joined the 416th Bomb Group, and we were to fly this type plane here, the A-20. Now the A-20 was a bomber, but it was a different type of bomber. It only had one pilot. And so the cockpit on an A-20 was quite small and crowded. And if you opened the window on the left and the window on the right, you could put your elbows out the window. So there's no room for anybody else, and it was crowded in there. So we trained in B-25s to learn how to fly an A-20. After 3 or 4 weeks of flying this way and that way, we were all flying the A-20s. And at that time, we had a squadron commander by the name of Ford, Major Ford. I want you to remember that name, Ford. And we were going to learn how to fly formation. Well, that was a big step for us to learn how to fly formation. And we had a briefing, and when we looked up on the board, we had the names and positions you would fly in. And as it turned out, I was on Ford's right wing. And at that time on formation, we would fly on our about 10 or 15 feet from the end of our wing to the number 2 man's wing, and about 10 or 15 feet back, which is fine. And the other guys would say, "Oh, you're on Ford's wing. He's a tough cookie." And Ford was a tough cookie. He was kind of built like a linebacker and very strict. And incidentally, I liked the strict military life. And so anyway, we took off this one day, and I pulled up on Ford's wing, and everybody else flew in position, and Ford is flying around the country, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 feet, no big deal, just getting us acquainted. And we were probably up 20 minutes or a half hour or something like that. Suddenly, my left engine quit, and I feathered it. And the feather in it is straightening out the propeller for least resistance. So I feathered it and stayed right in position, advanced the throttle on the other good engine and the hand manifold, and changed the prop a little bit, a couple little things. So I'm sitting there, and with this engine dead, and it feathered, and Ford is, keep in mind, he's only 80 feet from me. And finally he turns and sees me and says, "Get out." And so maybe 10 or 15 seconds went by, and the phone, the radio, he came over the radio and he said, "Number 2 man, take a heading of 204 or whatever it was and go back to the field." Now keep in mind, I needed that because I didn't know where we were. All this other flying we did, all you do is follow the leader. So flew back there, and when the other guys landed, they said, "Boy, you're going to catch it. Ford is really going to chew you out." So, well, I can't help it. And they said, "We know what you did. You forgot to change gas tanks." No, I didn't. Anyway, he came back, and I said, nothing came of it. Ford didn't say anything, and then in due time, we did a little bit more trading, and then it was time to go overseas, and I think it was January 3rd, we packed up everything, and after moved here, suddenly we're in England. We were in England and at a town called Wethersfield, and we got located there. I think it'd be a good idea if I gave you an overall picture of the European theater of war. And that is, we would possibly start with Bomber Command. out of London. Bomber Command never got enough credit for, in my thinking, but they're the ones that call the shots and put everything together. And everything is considerable. At that time, the 8th Air Force was the dominating Air Force, and always was, and always will be. And they flew B-17s and B-24s, Liberator and the Flying Fortress. And their job was to fly in deep into Germany to hit the industrial cities, and where the additional responsibilities was on fighters. Our fighter covers were all 8th Air Force fighters that would protect you, and then there was the 9th Air Force. The 9th Air Force is what we were in, was not nearly as large, and we flew nothing but twin-engine bombers. And at that time, the B-26 Marauder was the #1 plane, bomber plane, and we joined the 416th. We joined them with. We became the first A-20 group in Europe, and then I think that's enough on the group, overall group. And then, if you could, I'll give you a little layout of the field that we lived in. If you'll think of a baseball diamond, first, second, third, fourth base, or home plate, and we had 4 squadrons in one group. And at the field, we located individually. So let us say at first base, we'd put a 668, which I was in it. That's one squadron. And then another squadron at second base, and another squadron at third, and then one more squadron at home, along with headquarters. And now in baseball, there's only 90 feet between the bases. In this case, on the field, the squadrons were at the perimeter of the field, and we were about a quarter of a mile apart. Each one lived individually, and that's kind of the layout there. And as I think about it, would you like to go on a mission? You want to go on a mission? Oh, there's a number of people up there who want to go on a commission. Well, I'll tell you what. Get a good night's sleep, if you can, because the orderly is going to wake you up about 4:30 in the morning, and you'll have probably about 45 or 50 minutes before you have to report to pre-briefing. And just a little advice to the wise, when you get to see the restroom facilities in a bomber plane, combat bomber plane, you'll realize suddenly you're not at the Marriott. And so take advice and prepare yourself for a few hours. So the orderly tell you to be at the pre-flight, possibly, let's call it 5:50, and I'll meet you there. So now we all go to bed, and no, before I tell you what, I'm going to tell you right now, it's about 15 or 18 degrees right now. It's cold. It's March 3rd, and 15 to 18 degrees temperature on the ground now. Here, up at altitude, it's going to be possibly 10, 15 below zero. So you're going to have to wear your sheepskin winter clothing. That's the sheepskin trousers, and they zip up the side, and boots, and then a jacket, and then gloves, and a helmet, because it's going to be cold. And So wear all of them. Now the next day I'll meet you at pre-flight. So we do. In the next morning we were at pre-flight, and you'll sit with me, and at pre-flight they'll give you all the information you need to fly the mission. On the blackboard is a large board of possibly 15 feet by 8 or 10 feet high, and they list the leaders of the flights and a number of other things. What time we take off, the target, the direction you're going, the radio information with the fighter group to protect you, and of course the destination and the target we are to bomb. And then from there we leave the briefing, and we get in the trucks, the regular trucks, the canvas over the top, and it's flat seats on each side. And by this time we're fully equipped. And of interest, in my opinion, when we're sitting in the truck and all bundled up, and now we know the target, we're a little concerned. And as I noticed, I look at the fellows on the other side, nearly everybody is looking down at the boots on the opposite side. Very little conversation, if any, probably none. And then the trucks will leave us off at our plane. Now at this time, there would be 2 gunners and 1 pilot get off at each plane. We had 3 men aboard. And the leader of that particular group would have a bombardier navigator. They're in this flight that we talk about. There's 6 planes, and the group will put up 6 flights of 6, a total of 36 planes. And incidentally, on that, we would have 3 crewmen, 3 personnel on our bombers. On the Marauders, the B-26 that I mentioned a few minutes ago, that would have a crew of 6. The B-17s and the 24 had a crew of 10. Well, that's a big loss differential when one of us shot down. The 8th Air Force would lose 10 men, Marauders would lose 6, we'd lose 3. So from an economical viewpoint, our planes were the most economical to the U.S. government, because they could replace the planes, but they could not replace the personnel that's already trained. So we will now take off. And we'll take off in the same order that we're on the blackboard. The leader goes off first, and then the wingman goes off. And there will be, keep in mind, there will be 6 flights of 6, and each flight would have a bombardier navigator. So in the air would be 6 bombardier navigators, which would make a crew of 4, and all the rest are 3s. So on the way, there's a lot of things to do. We were not too worried about fighter, because our cover from the 8th Air Force fighter pilots was excellent, and the Germans didn't come after us that much. Our big problem was flak, and we'd fly at 12 or 13,000, and the heavies would fly at 22, 24,000 feet high. I might at this time tell you a little bit about evasive action. Incidentally, in this group setup, we have flight number 5, which the leader is 1, number 2 is the right side, 3 is the left, 4 is the second box, 5 is their wing, and 6 over here. And we were 5, and I'm the leader of 5, and you guys are with me. So, on the evasive action, when you start catching flak, the flak comes from the ground at our altitude of 12 or 13, about 8 seconds from you see, if you happen to see the guns go off, and they go off in groups of 6 or 8, all at one time. It'll take about 8 seconds to get to our altitude. It's a German 88, which is possibly the most outstanding gun in World War II for sure, and it still is. It's a fabulous gun. So we would take evasive action, and of course each leader kind of developed his own. And I know in my case, evasive action, if we were to go straight towards you, that we might take a turn of 5 or 7 degrees and then come back maybe 12 degrees to make it difficult for the anti-aircraft to track us. Well, they got so they could anticipate this. So what I came up with, I liked it very much, and that was if I would go to the right, I would go up maybe 200 feet, but not touching the throttle. Well, when we went up 200 feet, we lost maybe 5 miles per hour. But now but as you see, the flak is now coming up in front of us because they anticipated the same speed. We stay that way for 20, 30 seconds or whatever. Then I'd come down to left maybe 14 or 15 degrees, and when I came down maybe 200 feet, now I'm going faster than they expected. But I would have a rolling gear. Now from there, I'd go back up to the 2, maybe cut across. And in my thinking, the anti-aircraft down below would want to break up a formation. Their target was to break up the formation so we in turn could not hit our target. So they would concentrate on one flight. And it could be the flight behind you didn't get anything because they skipped a flight and started at the 4th or 5th. But that's the evasive action that I used from scratch. And it was very, very good. And now we end up going on the bomb run. The bomb run is really probably 80% of the flak we'd get on the bomb run. And what we would do if the target was straight ahead, we would fly at an angle probably 25, 35 degrees past on the right-hand side of the target. And then when we turn on a bomb run, which would probably be 20 or 25 miles from the target. So that's when we turn on the bomb run. We'd turn on the bomb run as a flight of 6. And you'd use evasive action until your bombardier said, steady as you go. And then he'd take over and tell you 2 degrees right, 1 degree or 2 degrees left, hold it, 1. And I know in my case, Jack Berg was my bombardier, and he was really good at getting the work done in less than 3.5 seconds, 3.5 minutes, and but that could be a long time too. Well, each group would bomb like that, and also take pictures, and then assume you didn't know right then whether you hit or not. At this moment, I'll tell you about the type targets we had. The reason we flew tight was our target was so small, such as a bridge. Now visualize yourself at 12 or 13,000 feet, and to hit a bridge that might be 150 feet wide and 300 feet long. Well, that's a pretty small target. And so we had to fly tight in order to have the one bombardier of the group hit the target with 5 or 6 of the planes. And where are we
Well,
now?
why don't you, if you would, point out, Joe, after taking us on that typical mission, and of course the whole time you're there, you'd go on missions, usually, 3 days out of 4?
Yeah, well, that's right, but okay, I will take that, but I'll come back on this mission. We'll come back to our own field first, and assume that on this mission we're moderate flak, and that would be just 3 to 5 holes or something like that in your plane, and none of them were shot down. But now we get back to our field, we land, and we go into debriefing. Before we were at briefing, now we go to debriefing. And now when your trucks pick you up, now the tone of the airmen is a lot different. Now they're smiling a little bit. Did you see this? Did you see that? Yeah. Oh boy, you should have seen this, and whatever it is. So the attention or the excitement is distinctly better. Now we get out and we go to debriefing, and that consists of going through a line and talking to the psychiatrists and many other officers. But before we went through the line, we were given a shot of Old Overholt whiskey, 110%. And now the reason for that, some of the guys would be pretty scared and hardly able to talk at all. But after 15 or 20 minutes after they had the shot of Old Overholt, which was so strong you could hardly believe it, you could hardly shut them up. And that was exactly what they wanted. So then you'd go through the debriefing line, and from the debriefing line, you'd go back to your barracks. And then, of course, there would be back in the barracks, back to your hut. We lived in a hut, a round top, corrugated hut, and that was the end of that. And then you suggested...
well, you of course, went on many missions, and my suggestion was maybe you give them an idea of some of the more special missions, like, for instance, your 20th mission, as I recall.
Yeah,
was
all
very...
right, yeah. Well, on the 20th mission, in the 20th of May, I don't think you want to be on that, so I'll give you a day off on that one. And 20th mission, we had a mission to either Rouen or in France or Amiens. I'm not just sure which, but both of them we knew were tough missions. And in that day, I was not a flight leader that day. I flew the number 4 slot, the leader, number 2 man, number 3 man. Number 4 is right behind the leader and down about 20 feet and back 35, 40 feet, or maybe 50 feet. And then I got the 2 wingmen back there. So we had takeoff and we flew over there. The particular leader I had at that time was known for a long bomber, and I never did like that. I never thought it was necessary. But as it so happened, I think it was Amiens, and they had a marshalling yard. Marshalling yard is a railroad yard where they switch, and a railroad marshalling yard might be 75 or 80 yards wide and 300 yards or so long. And that would be marshalling yards. And so we come into the target, and on that day, we happened to catch a Panzer division. That's a tank division that was cutting through, and they were in the marshalling yards at that time. And the Germans used a freight car about probably 25 feet long. So they had a tank on each one of those with 88s. And I don't know how many there were, but I'd say there'd probably be 30, 35 tank cars, plus the normal protection for Amiens, and we had heavy flak. They used to say that if you saw flak go off, and you in the movies and such, you see the black bursts of flak and that. But if they go off within 100 feet of you, you see orange. It's for a tenth of a second. And that day, my view would be right out in this area here. So I'd be looking at my plane that I'm following right up there, and I saw 15, at least 15 orange flashes. Now, if there was 15 orange flashes there, I can't see those behind me. But if it was anything like the 15 I saw, now we're up 75 or 85 orange flashes, which means they're going off within 100 feet of you. Well, as it turned out, a number of things happened. One was very unusual. The left-hand bomb bay door of the guy I'm following, the leader, came off. Can you imagine a door about 15 feet long and 3 feet wide tumbling through the air? At this moment, I don't know whether over my head or over on the plane's head or below it. And then my right-hand guy, he got hit badly, and he came into my plane. His wing tip was probably as close as 10 feet from me, not from the plane, 10 feet from me, and he rolled over, and he went down, and another fellow on the other side, someplace. I looked over, and I saw about the bottom of, maybe in there someplace. He went down. We got a lot of flak. At that time, I knew that these two went down, but there's an assumption that you have when you're in those conditions that they bailed out and now they're captors, they're prisoners of war or something like that. Tough break and all that, but and on both of them you feel that way. Well, as it turned out, all of the crews were killed too. So in my thinking, what really happened, they themselves got hit, possibly the pilot in both cases, and but we lost 2 crews in that one. And as it turned out, my plane, number 4, was the only one to get back to England, to Wethersfield. There were 2 or 3 of them bellied in on the south coast of England, which that's the first place that would be friendly, and because we were still in England at this time, so yeah, so that's where we that's what happened there. And then
Another interesting mission you went on was the one that you called the Windows mission.
Oh, yeah, the Windows. I don't think there's many of you ever heard of a Windows mission. But the Windows, and this is how it started. Captain Osborne said to me one day, he said, throw a few things into your job kit and kind of plan on being away for a couple of days. And I said, what's going on? And he said, we're going someplace. And I said, I thought that was volunteers. Yeah, he said, I volunteered for you. And, oh, thanks a lot. And then another fellow, Lesher. So the three of us each had our own planes and crews and also mechanics and an extra radio man. So we take off and we fly to a very small, obsolete or no longer used airport about towards the Channel. At Wethersfield, it was 35 miles from east of London. And so we flew up closer to the Channel, and there we landed at this old flying field, and it struck me oddly that they had a red barn very close to the runway. A red barn, or a double-deck barn, like a cattle barn that you see, and that became our home for a couple of days. And we slept in the haymow. Art Osborne was in touch with 9th Air Force and the radio man. And the windows, if you women would know, on pasta, we had pasta, what they call bow tie pasta. And that's exactly what it looked like, except it was aluminum foil, the thinnest aluminum foil you could get. That was just twisted in, and they had garbage bags full of it. Probably the whole garbage bag probably weighed, I don't know, 4 ounces or something. And we loaded the planes with that. And the idea was, and this is what we did on the next mission, or the following morning, we took off, the three of us, and Art Osborne knew the target. We were to follow him, but after we got to altitude, we were right-hand man, number 2 man would swing right by about a mile, and the left about a mile, and we would fly towards the target, maybe just short of the bomb run, probably. And the gunners in the back would throw out the foil, which we call windows. And I think you got the name Windows because you could throw it out your window too. But we threw handfuls of it out, and the idea behind the windows was, in the middle, it was to follow the radar, confuse the radar, the German radar, as to the real planes. And we flew a mission one day. The next day we flew 2 missions, and the third day we flew 1 and then went home. But in the meantime, we slept in the barn, and that was a real change. Now, they continued to use the missions on certain occasions, but that was the only time I flew on the missions. And then another thing that we have not covered too well, and it's tough to explain to you, is the emotion involved. Now, on the Windows mission, as I explained it, it sounded pretty simple, but when you think about it at that time, it's brand new. So we don't know what's going to happen. Also, we don't have any fighter cover. we're going into Germany or France or the opposition without any protection, and we don't even we're not even flying in a flight. We're a mile apart or so. And so there was quite a bit of anxiety before the mission, and then after the first couple missions, then the Germans didn't pay any attention to us, and we were pleased that we went on home. But there is anxiety, and I want to tell a story about the anxiety. What do we got there?
Well, I was going to say we're probably getting pretty close to D-Day.
Oh, yes, that's right, D-Day. You people have all heard of D-Day. That's June 6th of 44. We knew that something was going on for a week or two before that, because it's just odd things were happening. And, well, on D-Day, I know they woke us up about 4 o'clock, 4 a.m., and during the night, the ground crews painted the wings of the planes with a yellow stripe about 10 inches wide over the same direction as you fly, 10 inches wide, and then the bottom two, and they 3 stripes like that on each wing, and bright yellow, and that was to tell the ground crews when they see a plane with a bright yellow, they're the Allied planes. You know, all Allied planes were painted that same fashion. And anyway, we went through the normal briefing, one thing and another. And in this case, I was flying with Art Osborne that day with him. I mean, he had his plane, I had mine, of course. And we went in over the channel. You heard about all the thousands of ships, so we won't go into that. They were there. And as we came over the channel to the cliffs of Normandy, we spread out about probably about 50 yards, maybe 100 yards apart, and in a blanket form. And we toggled out the bombs. By toggling them out, they'd be one go out every probably half second, and they were 25-pound anti-aircraft, anti-personnel bombs. And so you'd just toggle them out, maybe, so it took a minute or two to get through the whole works. And all kinds of fire coming up. We were at, I used to say 400 feet, but they officially say we were at 700 feet. And it was just the break of dawn. So we had looked down, it was still dark down there, but you could, with the fire coming up, a lot of ground fire, a lot. It would be just like 4th of July here that we just saw, whatever one you saw. And a lot of ground fire, many, many tracers. And then we bombed not on the first part of the land. We started bombing and let maybe a quarter of a mile back in, toggling out, because we really didn't know who got up the cliffs and how far they went in. Then in the second mission, I happened to fly 2 missions that day. There were 3 of us in the whole group. Flew 2 missions. Second mission, we did the same thing, but we didn't start bombing, releasing the bombs for maybe a mile back, and then went further back to Caen in that area. A good friend of mine, Jim Church, he was shot down in that. He was his 7th mission, and I think he was the only one that I knew that went down that day. So that was the D-Day, And
Now you had a couple of side stories, one of which is a fascinating story, which is the emotional Airman Hill and the night flight.
yeah, I'll tell you one about Hill first.
Okay.
On our off time, I kind of watched the other fellows as close as I could. And on with Hill, when we were playing poker on an off day, he had never played the game of poker, but he was great for drifting around, and he was a heavy smoker. And he would smoke a cigarette, and everybody smoked at that time, you know. But there would be 2/3 of an inch of red tobacco. He took such deep drags of them. And I watched him a lot, and I got thinking about him to be aware of them. Well, as it turned out, it wasn't long after that, on a flight east of Paris. I don't remember the target. He's on my right wing, and I got a flight. I forget where I am on the flight, but we bomb the target, and then on the way back to England, to Rutherfield, the gunners brought my attention and said to look at your number 2 man, which was Hill. And I looked over there, and keep in mind we flew close enough where you could see the fellow's face, and whether he was smiling or laughing, or you could read it, because he's only 50 or 75 feet. Well, it turned out Hill was laughing, but flying very close to me, and scaring me to the point that I had to drop down 10, 15 feet. And then, but he was emotionally upset at that time. I don't know that. But anyway, I left the group at that time, and because we're probably close to the channel on the way back, and we're not afraid of flak or anything. Well, he followed me, and then I went into a couple, you might call them extreme or vicious acrobatic moves to get rid of them. And then I came back to the group. Now the group had gone ahead, and they were probably by this time 6 or 7 miles ahead. And somebody else took over because there was other planes in the squadron. Anyway, we got back to the base, and again we went through the old overhaul line, and I got so I couldn't take it at all. I skipped it and gave them to the gunners, and I got to my psychiatrist, and I said, I can't fly with Hill anymore. He's lost it somehow. And I reported him, and the gunners did too. But I'm not with them. You went individually. And well, as it turned out, they also did. Well, they took Hill off of flying status, and actually transferred him to an infantry group to fly in a Piper Cub as a 4 advisor. And I happened to run in, and then we had with the invasion, of course. Then I ran into him in Paris one day, and he said, "You did me the biggest favor going." He said, "I was so nervous that I couldn't stand it anymore." And he was good. He liked the Piper Cub. And then the other one was
the night flight.
Night flight. You know, people wonder if you only fly every 3 or 4 days, what do you do in the meantime? Well, there's a lot of things, such as training and such. But in one particular case, they told me we had a couple of new trainees, new pilots came in from the States, and they needed experience of night flying in England, and to go down to the flight line at maybe 2 a.m. and meet them, and I did and you take them up and introduce them to night flying. Well, night flying in England in World War II, England is blacked out. There isn't a light, period, not even a smallest light. No street lights, no headlights in cars, nothing. And it turned out to be a high overcast. There was no lights of stars or anything else, which is about what you expect at night. And so we're the three of us are flying. I got a plane on each side. And I had met the guys before, and they looked pretty good to me. And I was comfortable with them. And I was actually flying an A-20B. That doesn't mean much to you, but it's one of the first A-20s, and there was a lot of improvements ever since then. But we're flying along someplace over England, and the instrument panel fell down on my lap. Never heard of such a thing. And when it fell down, it disconnected all the instruments. The altimeter, the speed, everything except the engines. The lights, all the lights are gone, all the radio's gone. And now I've got these two fellows on my wing, and they actually moved in a little closer, so their wing light would illuminate my wing without any lights. And because if you, in formation, and especially night formation, if you lose the lead plane, you can never catch them again because you'll have a collision. So you got to get out of there. So I'm trying to think of what to do. I got a problem. I can see them, but they can't see me. That is if we're loose. So after, maybe we flew for about 15 or 20 minutes, something like that. I put it in a circle to make sure I didn't go all over the Atlantic or something like that. So I put it in to think of what to do. I really couldn't come up with an option that was worthwhile. So I just did decide that those two fellows, my opinion of them, were sharp. If I leave, they'll know what to do, and they will call the radio for instructions of what direction to go to get back to the field for a heading. And I can't help them any other way. So we were flying nice and level, and then I hauled it back and pulled out of there quicker than they could follow me. Because ordinarily they'd follow me. They'd think it was probably part of the introduction to night flying. So I pulled out, and now the problem is me. I don't have any radio. I can't see the ground. It's as black. It's as black as you can be if you go in the closet and close the door. That's how black it is. I can't see a thing. But it's amazing how I keep flying for a couple hours. And then possibly the little bit of break of dawn, just enough to see the horizon, that came in to be a big aid. But as I'm circling and circling, I just kept circling, there was a spot down on the field. Maybe I was at 3,000 feet. There was a spot down there on the ground that my eyes got accustomed to the darkness, and it was a rectangle area, possibly looked like 300 yards long, 400, something like that, maybe 150 yards wide. But in England, to find a square or any area with 90-degree angles is practically impossible, because it's all hedgerows and crooked fields and crooked roads and crooked rivers. I didn't say anything about the people, but they were good. So I got lower and lower and lower. My concern was, I don't know how much gas we got. And if I wait to the point where we run out of fuel, now I got to either bail out or let the plane crash or whatever. So I didn't want to allow enough time to go by and have that happen. Well, as it turned out, I got lower and lower and lower, and now I'm about 200 feet around this spot, and I decide that's a landing field. And it'd be about like this. And I come around and I drop the wheels, and I'm coming down here, and I'm about 40 feet off the ground when the lights came on. The lights come on, the hooded lights on the runway lights come on. I lay in there, and that the whole thing.
Exciting evening.
Yeah, I couldn't even explain it. Exciting evening.
Yeah.
And so that gives you an idea of some of the emotion that was there. I indicated too the emotion that is involved at pre-flight, and also very noticeable in the truck that takes us out to the planes. There's no humor there, I'll tell you that, and everybody just kind of sits there, and of course they're all bundled up in the headgear, and they look like zombies anyway. You couldn't look good in those things, but everybody's looking down. Those people are looking at your boots, you're looking at their boots, nobody's saying anything, and then after the mission is over, then everybody's happy about it. Now, incidentally, on the missions, maybe 18 or 20 were what we call milk runs. You know, the weather was good, fighters were there, we hit the target. We didn't have any flag, maybe a few here or there. That's a milk run. And so they weren't all like that 20th mission, the 20th of May. There were some tough ones, and of course, we got accustomed to the tough ones, and we looked at emotionally that being shut down, we knew maybe 20 or 25% of us are going to get shot down, 30% some thought. But I think we all had the feeling that surely it won't be me. I know we're going to lose people. I know it won't be me. And that's why we had the attitude, and we never got real close to anybody else. You'd have a good friend, and you might go on flat leave, which we'd go on, take 5 days off and go to Paris or Edinburgh, Scotland, or London, and for 4 or 5 days. And you'd know that fellow, but we never got close to anybody. And
you know, before you get into your story about your 65th mission, when you're talking about people and so on, if I recall, you did have a story about Francis Demand.
Yeah, Francis Demand. D-E-M-A-N-D. We pronounce it, but we had a reunion, a group reunion, just a year ago or so in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it was hosted by relatives of Francis Demand. Now, Francis was in another squadron. I didn't know him well. I knew him. I had the feeling I know him, but he doesn't know me. That's about how close we were. But Francis happened to be an extremely good-looking guy. Coal black hair, and he should have been in the movies. On a particular mission, and I don't remember what the mission was, I had a flight, he was a flight leader, and I was a flight leader, and we took off, and we're not at the target, or not at the bomb run, we're en route, but probably very close to the target. And he was flying up here with his 6 planes, probably a half mile from me. And I was down here a little bit lower than he was, maybe 400 or 500 feet with my 6 planes. And I looked up at him, and he was in good shape, and I looked away, and possibly over something, and maybe 12 seconds later, it was easy to glance up there, but I'm to go out right here, and he was and I looked up in the air, and where he was with the 6 planes was a pile of smoke, probably 200, 300 feet high, and black smoke, and 100 feet wide, just something you've never seen before. Francis got hit by flak, and I think 4 planes went down. Possibly what happened, nobody knows, is one of the 88 shells went into his bomb bay and hit one of the 500, we've carried 500-pound bombs, and hit the fuse of the one bomb, and blew up the whole thing. And the wingmen that were with them, because it took them, it was either 4, all the planes got damaged, but 4 were down, and Francis was killed, and all the others were killed too. And incidentally, well, that was a freak accident.
Yeah, and
it was a freak accident, but to take that many people, and Francis was very honorable. We all were, but he was very noticeable because of his looks.
Yeah. And it was all part of your story and experience,
yeah.
Which brings us to your 65th mission.
65, that's mission, not miles per hour.
No.
And 65th, that was the maximum we were to fly. When we got on the 65th, finished your 65th, they'll send you back to the States. That was our obligation, the 65. That is for the medium bombers. The heavy bombers, they had, I think, about that time, 40 or 45. Anyway, on this particular day, I was flying a deputy lead to the group. That's the 36 planes. We had a colonel lead, Colonel Willits was leading the whole group, and I was on the right-hand side. And I was a little angry because I had flown the day before, and you very seldom fly another mission the following day. But anyway, I am, and we're in the number 2 position, and our target was Sauerladen. I think it's the marshalling yards at Sauerladen, Germany, in the Saar Valley, which is north in Germany. And we had a heavy overcast going over, and we were involved with the B-26s. We were flying along with them. But suddenly I got hit, and I flew up in the air 15 feet. Explosion underneath me. And
I'm going to jump in here right now and tell the story, because the man sitting next to me probably would rather have someone else read it, because he was some hero that day. And I'm going to quote from this book right here, which is the history of the 416th Bomb Group. And I quote, "On the 2nd of December, 1944, this mission was one that the then 22-year-old pilot said that he would never forget. Joe Meagher, flying a deputy lead to a box leader, approaching the target, felt a burst of flak lifting his plane, which was an A-20K, up about 15 feet, when he felt a numbing sensation in his right ankle. His manifold went to 0 on his right engine. He turned out of the formation, feathering his dead engine and noticing his left engine smoking. He quickly enumerated the various decisions he knew he would have to contend with, including having his crew bail out to safety, trying to make it to a friendly territory and bail out himself, stay with the plane and belly in, fly the damaged ship to safety with a painful injury. And his intercom was out, so he could not communicate in any way with his crew. He decided to go down under the overcast and look for a flat spot to belly in. Captain Meagher was thinking, what about my bombardier up in the nose of the ship? He doesn't have much protection. I can't talk to my crew. He trimmed up and started through the clouds at 240 miles per hour with one engine smoking. He got down to 800 feet, skipped hedgerows, and God, answering his prayers, gave him a flat surface being worked on by Caterpillar tractors. Now, he knew he was in friendly territory, he thought, because Germans didn't use yellow cats. He buzzed the field 20 feet over the tractors, hoping they would pull the tractors off the flat surface. He pulled up into the clouds and dropped the plane nose sharply to force the wheels down since the hydraulics were out. He heard the thug, and he felt he was safe going in. On landing and coming to a screeching halt, everybody scrambled out of the plane. Gunner McCreary gave Meagher a shot of morphine to ease the pain. His ankle was broken, requiring a 6-month hospital stay. This was Captain Meagher's 65th mission. Tell us a little bit more about it, Captain.
All right. Well, we did get hit, as I said before, right underneath me, and I got hit in the ankle from the left-hand side, hit in the right ankle. It lodged right in the bone and did not come out the far side. But I couldn't lift my leg to work the rudders because I lost the right engine too. So the rudders come into play for quite a bit, especially on one engine. But as I look down, I see the blood on the floor by my foot, by the right foot, and I'm concerned. And I looked at it again. I had dropped the bombs. I did not fuse the bombs. I just dropped them as is, so they did not explode when they went down. And I didn't know where they were going on them. Anyway, I looked down again at a number of times, and when you stop and think about it, when you're looking from the top down, you don't know how much blood is there. You don't know whether it's 1/8 of an inch thick or ½ inch thick. And it also occurs to you, how much blood can a person lose and still be conscious? And again, I'm thinking if I lose too much blood and lose consciousness, that'll be the worst thing. Now I wouldn't even be able to shake the plane to advise the gunners and bombardiers to move out. So I remember asking God to help me make the right decision. And I also said to myself, you're a good pilot, or you're really good, or whatever I meant there. Let's show your stuff now. And I calmed myself down, and very calm and analytic, if you could say that. And we probably flew 25 minutes or so from the time we got hit back towards our lines. And then we finally got through. I knew that when we come through the overcast, it was kind of a rainy day, a misty day, that with only half or 2/3 power on my left engine, I'm not going to be able to fly this plane very long. So I'm going to have to make a decision quickly. And when I come down through the overcast, possibly I'd been down 10 seconds when I looked straight ahead, not 2 degrees that way or 4 that way, straight ahead, where the bulldozers skinning the field. Now they were skinning the top turf of the field. They were making a fighter strip for somebody else, and there was about 5 or 6 of them. And when I went over the field, wiggling my wings, I was saying, "I'm coming in, guys. Get those bulldozers off."
It's the grand opening for the new
that's
runway.
right. And I had to assume that the hydraulics are out. Everything else is out. So I had to pull the nose up in the air and dump it fast, real fast. And at the same time, you release the wheels. And in essence, the wheels flop forward, and the gravity would suck them in and lock. And then I heard the thud. That was the thud. And I knew, well, I wasn't positive. Anyway, they locked, and we skidded around, as you might see, in the wet ground. And they took me to one of the drivers of the had a pickup truck, and they took me into Reims, France. And I was in the hospital there at Reims for about 3 or 4 days, and then they went to England, and I never did get back to my own base. Went to England, and they put me on a Red Cross ship and come back to the States, and then I ended up in a hospital in Texas, and I was there. The reason it took so long is because if they put a cast on my leg, I'd end up with a stiff ankle. So I never even had a cast. I would just had a wrappings all the time. And I had a Dr. Glass who made me ambulatory. Now, that would be about the last thing I'd think about. But as he said, you'd end up with a stiff ankle. He wouldn't give me a crutches, and he wouldn't give me a cane. And the mess hall that I had to eat, he was 100 yards that way and 100 yards down that way. And the hallways just about like we got here. So I had a hop on one foot all the way over there to breakfast, hop all the way back. And you only, as you know, to hop, maybe you'd hop 20 feet at the best and then rest. So by the time I got back, it was maybe a half hour later. I got to start going back to get there for lunch. But as it turned out, Dr. Glass was right. I don't have a stiff ankle. And from there, they sent me to Newark, New Jersey. No, they sent me to Orlando, Florida. The other one was
right.
Orlando, Florida. And now the war is over now in Europe and also Japan. And the Orlando Army Air Base, they called it one of the 7 wonders of the Air Force because the officers' club was so beautiful, and it was beautiful. Yeah, but there was about 400 pilots there. All of them that have been through, had been trained or in the stage of training. But when the war was over, everything stopped, and they sent them to Orlando. They also made me flight leader in the flight line, in charge of the flight line. Now we're talking about in charge of the airplanes, not the mechanics that we had up at Suffolk Field. And now I am the boss, whether you like it or not, of the flight line. and determine who flew and who didn't fly. And it was pretty, now the war is over, the control was pretty ragged, I'll tell you that. And I made the top decision. So I flew whatever plane we had. We had some A-20s and B-25s and kind of various number of planes. And then one night at the Officers Club, probably about 6 o'clock, one of the West Pointers there rang for attention, and it was crowded, And he got up and he says, I got 2 tickets to the Army Notre Dame game tomorrow at Yankee Stadium. We're in Orlando, Florida, Friday night. He's got 2 tickets for the Notre Dame Army game.
The 2 #1 teams in the country.
They were the the 2 toughest teams in the country. And I said, I'll take them. And he gave them to me, no charge. And I didn't know many people, but I did know the club manager. And I needed a co-pilot. I said, we'll fly up there. And the club manager became my co-pilot, and we got a mechanic that would do B-25s. So I said, we'll meet at 8 o'clock in the morning, we'll take off. So we took off the next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, flew up to Mitchell Field. I'd never been to Mitchell Field in my life. And but there was a number of planes coming into Mitchell Field, which is an Army air base. And so we landed and parked the plane, and then I had to go through Commons to check in the flight. And we walked into the Commons room, which was really crowded. I was only in 12, 15 feet when I heard, Meagher, where in the world have you been? And I looked over there, and sitting over here was now, used to be Major Ford, now General Ford. And I went over there, and he's with I have one other general that I know, and 2 or 3 full colonels. And he introduced me. He said, where in the world were you? He said, I looked all over the Air Force for you. I was to make a B-47 group, and I wanted you to be one of our squadron commanders. And of course, I was really taken back by that. To have Ford remember me, that's the first time I've ever shaken hands with. That's the first time I've ever been in the same room with him. But in due time, I kind of analyzed it, that the time that I had a single engine on his wing, he never forgot that, and he kept track of me.
Was that B-47, was that the first jet bomber?
That's right. The B-47 was the first jet 4-engine bomber. And of course, I would have loved to fly that. But being in the hospital and the war's over, as soon as the war was over, they stopped manufacturing all of them. So
great story you told us, Joe.
Yeah.
Great story.
Well, I wanted to take a second or two, if I could, for the audience out there to remember all the men and women that didn't make it through the war, and they died so we could remain free. And I want to thank you.
We both salute them.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay.